Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we are talking about a very important current event, but it is not the current event that you were thinking about because YouTube has been shutting down and banning channels talking about the European situation, wink wink. So we won't be talking about the elephant in the room. Instead we'll be focusing on a current event that is very close to me, and that is the encampment outside of the parliamentary building in Wellington, New Zealand. So this is a protest against future COVID mandates, and it is an illegal protest because of certain things that make it illegal. Not every protest is illegal, but this one is. But we're going to be talking about why the New Zealand police aren't going in and breaking the protest up, which is what you might expect in other countries. So by talking about this, hopefully you guys will have a better understanding of what the New Zealand police goals are and maybe a little bit more about New Zealand culture and things like that. So there are, I think, 4 or 5 points I have on my list, so we will talk about that. So New Zealand is a country that has been colonised, and in New Zealand we have quite a big mixture of cultural groups. So we have Chinese from the Gold Rush period, and then we have Tangata Pacifica, so people from all over Pacific Islands, and we have Maori, and then obviously we have European descendants. So police have to work really hard to make sure that they are connecting with different cultural groups and the public to make sure that people do feel like they are actually there to protect them, and that the police aren't going after certain people, because if people feel like they are just going after certain people, then they won't cooperate with the police, which means that crime can continue to be committed, people can continue to be hurt, but they are too worried about the police's reaction that they won't seek help from the police, which means that these things keep on continuing. And that just means that the wider community is not doing well because bad people aren't being put away and good people are being offended against, but they're still too afraid to seek help from the police. So that's one of the big issues, I think, trying to maintain a good relationship between the police and the public to make sure that the police can be there and help the public and not be seen as this sort of aggressive force that we can't turn to, we can't trust them. That relationship has to be maintained. So the second thing is that the police in New Zealand don't carry weapons, which I personally think is a really great thing, that New Zealand isn't so violent that they have to go around carrying guns. It means that we can feel safe with them walking around in public, and that we can approach them and call on them for help without having to worry that it's going to turn into a really nasty, violent situation, which unfortunately that still does happen. But the reality with the police not having weapons is that they need to have extra protections to make sure that they aren't being hurt at their workplace, because every workplace has a responsibility to make sure that their workers are safe, and the police is no different. Like, a police person has to be able to go to work their time, and then go home and be safe and not be attacked or anything like that, because at the end of the day they work and then they go home, they're just like everybody else. So on top of that, because this protest is in the middle of a pandemic, that means that they have to be protected as well from viral infection, which I think is a big reason why they aren't going in and breaking it up, because if they are going into a mass of people who obviously aren't afraid about the virus and are probably carrying the virus, then there's a higher likelihood that they are going to get sick, and it is the responsibility of their employers to make sure that they aren't being put at unnecessary risk of viral infection or violence. So the third issue is that the right to protest is obviously a very important part of New Zealand culture and society. Without protests, we probably wouldn't be in the place that we are today, that people can protest about issues to do with race, socioeconomics, and the environment. That has resulted in a much more even society, although we still have huge problems to do with equality. But the right to protest allows us to go out and complain and say that we're fed up with certain things that are happening. And although we might not agree with the specific protest, we have to be very careful that we aren't putting restrictions on protests, or that the public doesn't feel like our potential to protest in the future is being put at harm's way. Because although we might not care about this protest, there are definitely going to be protests in the future where people are wanting to participate in. So the police would and politicians would do a very bad job if they showed, the optics of them cracking down on protests. Because although it might be needed to some extent, and although the protest might be illegal, you definitely don't want to make the public afraid that they won't be able to protest when they want to. Then the fourth issue, which I think probably is really high up on the list of reasons why the police aren't just going in and dragging everyone away, and that is to do with there are kids at the protest. And this, I think, would kind of be difficult to understand, because it makes it seem like, well, they have to go in and protect the kids, right? Because there are unsanitary conditions, which means that kids are being put in harm's way. They could be getting COVID or diseases that come from unsanitary conditions. But an even greater risk is if police go in, the children could be really harmed in two ways. One of them is physically. If the police are going in and the protesters are putting up a fight, which we know that they will because we've seen that earlier in the protests, then children who are much smaller, it's likely that they would be crushed or missed, and that, the fists are flying and all that sort of thing, so they could be really physically harmed. But on top of that, the psychological harm is, like, the risk of that is really, really high. Because if you have police going in and dragging someone away and that person is kicking and screaming, that's very scary for children. And if that's their parent or a family member, then that's going to be even more traumatizing. Hearing the police yelling and then, seeing your parent being dragged away and screaming and stuff, that's really going to put a high level of fear into the children, which can have a really negative effect later on in life. And this also connects back to public relations, right? So these kids, they're going to grow into adults. And if they have the strong memory of the police going in and taking away their parents, they're probably not going to trust the police at all, because they have seen what the police does to their family. So those things connect, and obviously it's really important that children aren't being harmed, and you have to weigh up the risk, like how harmed are they going to be being at this protest versus how harmed are they going to be if we go in, drag them away or drag their parents away. That's really something you have to weigh up. And I think at the moment the risk is looking like it's better if they're there and not being dragged away. But it all kind of depends. And obviously, talking about these things, we don't know what the situation is going to be like in the future. But these, I think, are really good reasons why the police aren't going in. And hopefully that gives you guys a better understanding of what the situation is and why it isn't being broken up the way that you might expect in other countries. So hopefully it will end peacefully and people will go home and people will be safe, including the police and protesters. But it's always a scary situation, and I understand that people are frustrated that the police aren't going in and breaking up the protest, but you know, looking at these things, it's a tough situation. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully I will see you guys soon. Still not talking about the elephant in the room, but maybe if YouTube gets their act together, then we might be able to talk about it. But I will see you guys in another video later on. Hey door!